Greetings everyone, this is SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, here to bring you another retro review from past seasons of the Loud House. In today's video, we take a look at the season 4 episode where Lincoln and Clyde wanted to give up on something they really wanted to do at first, and it was gonna be a long time until the unintended touchdown brought them round again to find out how much they really didn't want to give up after all. Today's episode is titled Rocket Man! Yep, you should have seen that one coming. Anyway, first we'll discuss the plot, and then my thoughts and critiques with my final score. So, let's get right into it. In this episode, Lincoln and Clyde beg their parents to let them attend a week-long space camp, but then they try to escape after they start having second thoughts about it, and how their parents think they need to give the camp more of a chance. Shockingly, the boys end up partaking in the flight simulator they were once afraid of, and they realize how much fun the camp is after all. Even though the parents decide to pick them up in the end, Lincoln and Clyde insist they stay for the rest of the week, to which their parents happily agree. Well, that concludes the plot of the episode, so now we come to my thoughts and critiques. When it comes to episodes focusing on parent-child relationships, Rocket Men is written in a way where the characters are portrayed as authentic, and I really appreciated how this episode turned out. This is one of those episodes that almost never comes up in any of the conversations I've had with other fans, and I believe it doesn't get the love and attention it deserves, especially knowing the history behind it. The episode was written by Sammy Crowley, who based the story off one of her own experiences when she attended an overnight camp as a kid. You can read her full story on this episode's official Wikia page, but conceptually her story is nearly the same as Lincoln and Clyde's. They wanted to be picked up from camp after just one day, and their parents, at least in the beginning, initially told them they were not going to be picked up. They said the boys needed to give the camp some more time before calling it quits so early. They explained how they may end up finding a silver lining before too long. Either that, or they didn't want to drive all the way up there after being persuaded into spending a lot of money for the camp. Sort of like, we didn't spend all this money just to have you kids run away before the end of the week. You're staying there and that's the end of it. Still, I have to give a lot of respect to the parents for deciding to pick the boys up the following day, despite the important lesson they were trying to teach. What they did does not make them soft or hypocritical. It proves that even though they were effectively wasting both their time and money, they figured if their kids were not happy, they weren't going to continue forcing them into doing something they felt strongly against. That's the sign of a good parent. Also, I really liked how Clyde's dads were so on board with letting Clyde spend a week away from their house, and how neither one of them were going out of their way to stop their son from attending the camp. Sure, Howard may have been a little hesitant at first, and he did have his usual parental breakdown when he showed up towards the end, but the fact he had so much emotional stability in the beginning and as he was leaving to go back home makes up for that temporary reminder of how overprotective he usually is. Seriously, I like this relaxed version of Howard a lot more than his cliche mother hen persona. It's the episodes in which Clyde's dads act more, normal is where I truly appreciate their characters, and again, I wish they would be presented like this more often. So yeah, the parents' roles in this episode were very genuine, and I in good faith cannot find too much fault in them. But now let's move on from them and talk about Clincoln McCloud. Just like their parents, the boys were written quite authentically as well, as in they were presented as any typical kid when they're excited about something that piques their interest. Something looks cool on TV, they want to do that cool thing too, but then one thing leads to another, and all the fun just rushes right out of them. I can't be too critical of how these two begged their parents to come get them and then try to bust out on their own after they talked up how totally worth it everything was going to be. We've all experienced what they did when we were kids, as in we all wanted to take off at the first sign of no longer having fun, but running away from what was supposed to be a great experience doesn't do anyone any favors. It's an important lesson their parents wanted them to learn, and in a sense, the boys had to learn it the hard way. They had to tough their situation out the best they could, and the parents initially not coming to get them, and the boys accidentally stumbling onto the flight simulator worked out to everyone's benefit. Visually speaking, that flight simulator did look pretty cool, and it does make you believe your life is in danger unless you complete the mission the computer wants you to do. But I'll admit, Lincoln and Clyde being afraid of that simulator earlier in the day was perfectly understandable, because there's no way I would ever get on that thing myself. I could not handle those kinds of speeds under that kind of pressure. I don't think I'd be able to handle an out-of-control gyroscope either. But for these two, the simulator was a very pulse-pounding experience, and they ended up enjoying the thrill, meaning they shouldn't jump to conclusions on what others have to say about anything. Nonetheless, this particular sequence contains my only critique of the episode, which would be that guy who was not only activating the simulator at a time when all the campers were supposed to be asleep, but also being well beyond distracted to not even notice what was happening on the monitor. I mean, really, Lincoln and Clyde were right there making all that noise, and this guy didn't know until the simulator ended? All the more reason to get that guy fired and give a pay raise to Taryn, my last positive of the episode. She was such a fun character despite not doing much of anything. She was so sweet to the boys, had a very caring personality, and you could tell she only wanted the best for her campers. Fun fact, her character is voiced by Taryn Van Slyke, a former social media coordinator for the Loud House and the short-lived but not forgotten Harvey Beaks. Not only is her character design the same as the woman who voices her, she was also part of Sammy Crowley's inspiration to make this episode. It's a shame we don't see Taryn taking on more voiceover gigs. She's definitely got a knack for acting, and maybe cartwheels as well, but that's a whole other story. Now before I give my final thoughts, let's hear what someone else has to say about this episode. Back once again to give his thoughts on Rocket Men, here's a guy I've collaborated with several times in the past on his videos, as well as my own, and now he makes his retro review debut on my channel. You all know the name, the Loud House Critic. The floor is yours, good sir.
Hello everyone, Torrin Smith Partee here, formerly known as the Loud House Critic, at your service. And for an episode called Rocket Man, I gotta say, it's not one of my personal favorite episodes. Not the fact that it's a Lincoln and Clyde episode, again, as if there's anything new to add to them. An episode like this, I was close to hating this episode, but somewhat, I showed a little sensitive side, and the side on my scale, I would put it somewhere on the yellow. And I know for a fact that there are some people who probably rolled their eyes at the fact that this was another episode that's centered around Clincoln McCloud. I don't mind that the episode is focused on them, knowing the fact that they have been good friends since season 1. But there was so much in this episode that just kept bouncing back and forth. I felt like the plot in this episode was most likely one that a lot of viewers would be able to relate to, of going to camp and finding out what it's not like what they imagine. Something like that has never actually happened to me before, where I was actually in a situation of an activity to another activity to another activity I didn't quite much likely enjoy at this camp. I felt like I was watching another episode of the whole picture and kick the bucket list again. I'll put more detail into this episode once I review it, because honestly there's nothing too interesting about this episode, and I really don't have too much to say about it, because this was one of the episodes that kind of made me fall asleep. I kid you not, that actually did happen to me, because it was a little bit boring to me, like I was watching Cowboys and Aliens. So most likely on my scale on this one, I would actually give it 5 out of 10. Gotta say, SteamTeamWK, felt actually fun for you bringing me back here. Never imagined you actually would put me into Rocket Man. I thought you would put me into an episode that I would know so much about. But it's all good. Thanks for having me here, and I gotta get back to the limousine.
Alrighty, thank you very much, Torrin. I know it may not have been the most exciting episode to talk about, but that's the best thing about fans. You just never know what they're going to say about any episode, whether they're good, bad, or even the kind many people sleep on, sometimes quite literally. But it's all in good fun. As always, I appreciate you taking the time to show up in another one of my videos, and here's to another future collab. And now, it's time for my final thoughts. Overall, besides my minor complaint about that flight simulator guy not paying attention to the extremely obvious situation Lincoln and Clyde got themselves in, this episode was really good. It felt realistic, and even more so when you realize it's based on one of the writer's childhood experiences. The boys learn not to give up on something so quickly before they have a chance to discover what's good about it, and the advice their parents gave them over the phone was reinforced by the end. I enjoyed how the parents, Clyde's dads in particular, were presented as both firm and fair in their initial stance in making their kids stay at the camp so they can get a better feel for it, and how they were still willing to pick them up the next day despite knowing they were originally coaxed into spending a large amount of money to send them there in the first place. And I don't know what else I can say about Taryn other than she played her role tremendously. In short, everyone had good character moments, and even though the 4th season was where fans started to think the show had nothing left to offer, this episode came along and it was just that good. With that said, I give Rocket Men a 9.7 out of 10. Well folks, that concludes my review of Rocket Men. This episode will always be one of the best reminders in which no matter how many justified critiques you can have for the parents, and believe me, I have my share of those, the moments they had in this episode were genuine, and it's hard to call them bad parents when everything they did was for their kids' enrichment and development. Any parent who's confident enough to let their child spend a few days away from home and possibly taking a financial hit for what could have very well been for nothing, and not coming down hard on them for a wasted trip to pick them up when they wanted to stay after all, is a parent I will always respect. If that's not being a responsible and loving parent, I honestly don't know what is. But anyway, as far as the rest of the episode goes, what did you guys think of it? Love it? Hate it? Something you would add? Change? Keep it as it is? Let me know in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe to this channel for the latest Loud House content. That's going to do it for me. I'll catch you guys for the next video, but until then, this is SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, signing off. Peace out, home slices.